Bicep, who are a Northern Irish duo from Belfast. I think they live in London at the moment. Not that that matters really. It's not an important detail to what they do with their music, but I'll go to Wikipedia. They broke out in a pretty big way in 2017 with their debut album, which I thought was really good. I remember reviewing it back in the olden days of my channel. I think I gave it a B+, which was part of my rating scale back then. Feels like a lifetime ago. It's interesting as well because I think I'm reviewing more artists these days that I reviewed way back then, so I keep thinking about my old scale a little bit more, which is weird. Regardless of whatever scale was used though, it was a really good debut album. It had banging anthems, ketamine anthems like Clue. They had such a festival-ready sound from the get-go that you couldn't really deny how fun and bouncy a lot of their tracks were. It was a really great way to kick off an electronic duo's career, and really since then they have elevated to huge heights, and they're pretty huge now actually. Expectations were always going to be high with their next album, which has now dropped, Isles, their sophomore release. I think people were probably anticipating great things from this one, and to be fair, they've provided a lot of juicy tracks here, but I will say it's a bit of a slight step down from their debut. I don't think it's expectations that have hindered this for me at all actually. I think the general vibe of this album feels a little bit more repetitive, more in the hypnotic state quite often. A lot of these tracks have samples that loop over and over again. Not that their debut didn't have that, but I feel like there is a bit more of an emphasis on that vibe this time around. And generally I think that can either really work for you, or it doesn't really hit you as much, and I think that's just generally how I feel with this album here. There are just a few moments that I'm kind of ready to move on. I want these tracks to maybe progress a little bit more. Some of the tracks really do go into great places though. The opening track, which is very tuneful with the doom 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 boom 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 boom. Vocal sample laced into it is so great as well. It creates its own little beat in its own right, and then you can hear the kind of like echoey in the background. Very subtle, but you can hear it, and it really adds to the track nicely. And then towards the end it just kind of elevates into this great place, progresses in the way that you'd expect a Gidge track to progress, and Gidge are really fucking good at their progressive type stuff. So if you ever want to know how to do something like that, I think you should just look at whatever they do in their music and think, yeah, I'm going to take ideas from that. Cazenove is very bouncy. It's got such a fantastic rhythm to it. It's also got this elastic feel to it, almost like you're pulling on something that's kind of like wobbling a little bit, which adds this really cool effect to the track. Totally gives them the future garage feel to the music here. Not the only time that garage shows up though. You've got more of a classic two-step anthem coming through with Saku. Really love the beat on this one. Lately I've been listening to a lot of Sunship, which are just legends in this sound. I've only recently discovered them, but I feel as though the beat to this one is reminiscent of those early days of the genre. Vocals here from Clara Lassan, who crops up a few times on this album actually, are very subtle. I think they need a bit more of a boost to them, a bit more of an oomph, maybe higher in the mix. But you know, what she's providing isn't necessarily bad. It just feels a bit too quiet. It's almost like you're listening to a Disclosure track where the feature is taking a bit of a back seat as opposed to being at the front driving the song, and I feel like they probably should have used her vocals a little bit better than that. I need to talk about Apricots though. This is probably my favourite track. The vocal sample is like a night and day difference to Saku here, because this carries the song. This flipped, weird, strange vocal sample is the forefront, and I love it. The strange warped voice here really reminds me a lot of something you'd hear in like an African album or something like that, and then the trance-like rhythms that come through on this track are great as well. Everything just comes together so well, and the repetition this time around doesn't really ever fade. I just feel like I'm enjoying it from beginning to end, and there's never a point where I feel like it loses steam steam. And that's where this album ends up darting around a little bit though, because the track Lido is very gleaming and shimmery with the instrumental here. It's really, really pretty, but it's hypnotic in the way that gets me a little bit... like I'm not really sucked in, you know. I think you could listen to this and be totally sucked in, but the impact just leaves me a little bit flat. It totally reminds me of all the times I make a cup of tea, I pour in the milk, I don't realize the milk is off until I take that first sip of the tea and I am sat staring into the abyss. The disappointment on my face is unmatched. That is what this track leaves me feeling. The track Sundial though is fantastic. I love the biting, crunchy drums on this one. Jesus Christ, the production here is fantastic, really top notch, and the best of what Bicep can give us. Then the eye-widening, eye-opening climax towards the end is stellar too. Once again, I feel like more of this would have really took this album to new heights. But it's one of those things, I think. I think it's a subjective sort of feeling that you could either really get sucked into some of the hypnotic rhythms, or you could be a bit like me where I'm just wanting to move on to something else. It really is dependent on the album. Sometimes this really works and sometimes it doesn't hit as well. It's just one of those things. I do like the way it ends though. I think it's a good strong ending track here, because your track before it, Fur, has a bit of a limp beat. Once a break beat comes through though, it sounds great, but the actual core beat of the instrumental is a bit hollow and sounds a bit rusty, honestly. But yeah, once you move past that track, the final track is a great way to end things. So yeah, I mean, overall, I guess I was sort of darting around with my positives and negatives, but I feel like the album does that a bit itself anyway. So it ends up feeling like the album is a bit of a mishmash of sounds and ideas. But you know, the results are a bit mixed at times, but I think overall it's definitely an enjoyable listen. I think what Bicep are doing is really good at the moment, and I enjoy them for what they are. I think their debut was just a tad better, but you know what, I think this is a good, admirable follow-up release to that debut. But let me know what you think in the comments. But my score is going to be a 6 out of 10. Definitely a good album though, and yeah, thank you for watching this review. Tell me your thoughts, if you agree, disagree, all that kind of stuff. Thank you for watching. Do subscribe if you haven't already. Tell me what I should review next as well. Point me to some releases at the moment that aren't really being talked about. You know, I love that kind of stuff and want to highlight that on my own channel here. Thank you for watching. Have a good day and goodbye.